Okay, hello everyone, and welcome essentially back to the podcast without banners. We were originally called a podcast of Ice and Fire, but it was pointed out to me that that name was taken, hence why I changed the title of that. So anyway, new name, and now we're talking about season 2 this time. And before we do though, uh, just to get it out of the way, since Maeve LeFay was not here last time, and I guess I probably should have said it, I am joined by Graham again, and this time we do have Maeve LeFay with us. Hey guys.
Hello.
And since Maeve wasn't here last time, we're going to give her some time to give her thoughts on season 1. So whenever you're ready.
All right. I do first off want to say I'm not wearing a cape to be dramatic. I was kind of aiming to look like Melisandre, but it's just really cold. I live in Canada. It's cold.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
I'm cold. So I read up to book 3 before I started watching the show because I didn't want to get into it before this big ass spoiler. And one of my first things was that was the best adaptation I'd ever seen of a book series.
Really?
And yes, they were very faithful to the original material. They did have to change the ages of the children, which made me like Sansa less. A lot of people said that they liked the character of Sansa more because she was portrayed by a good actress. But I like Sansa more in the book just because she was 11 in the book instead of 13. But other than that, I was really impressed. The acting was phenomenal. The sets were fantastic. And, of course, the writing was good. And I liked some of the little nuances that they added in, like little jokes here and there. And I was really impressed with Peter Dinklage's portrayal of Tyrion. I did not know who they were going to get to play Tyrion, and I'm very, very happy with the choice. And
I think
of course,
everybody was happy with that choice.
Pretty good. No, so I was really impressed, and it was so faithful actually to the original material. I was really shocked when season 2 did deviate the way it did from the source material. Yeah. Overall, like five stars out of 5 for season 1. Very, very happy.
Okay. Now, I pretty much figured that just to get some kind of structure to this, that we talk about one storyline at a time. So, if anything, I think just to get it out of the way, we'll do the Night's Watch storyline first. So,
yeah, sounds fair. Since last time we kind of just jumped back and forth between storylines with real coherency.
So with the Night's Watch storyline, they've gone north of the Wall. They go to Craster's Keep, where
AKA they finally do something.
Yeah. And we have to put up with another really unlikable douchebag, which, of course, in this case, it obviously makes sense. I'm not really sure if he'd be on like Joffrey and Viserys' level, but he's up there. Jon is generally disgusted by the fact that he marries his daughters, and
what is it with George R. R. Martin and incest?
Well, incest was actually very common in the Middle Ages, and it's like I know it's not Earth in the Middle Ages, but that is where he draws his inspiration from. Like royalty would marry cousins. Yeah. And Craster's just an incestuous
douchebag. Anyway, and then later on, Jon witnesses Craster offering one of his sons to the White Walkers, and it's basically explains why Craster is able to survive where he is without being bothered by the White Walkers at all. And that Craster notices this and basically forces the Night's Watch to leave, which I always thought was a bit silly that they didn't just kind of kill him, but that's something for season 3, I guess.
Yeah, they're saving that for later.
Yeah. Eventually they get to, or at least, they get to the Fist of the First Men, and John goes off with Core and Halfhand to take out some wildlings that are nearby. They kill them all except for the character that we get introduced to, Egret, and John is supposed to kill her, but just can't do it for whatever. Yeah, he just can't bring himself to do it. So she basically runs off. He catches her. She tries to seduce him, and it doesn't work. And eventually manages to get away from him long enough to lead him to another pack of wildlings. And they find out that Corin has also been captured as well. Corin and John end up having to basically get into a fight, so one of them, I think the way he words it is he wanted John to win, but I think really I take it as either of them could, but Corin happened to be the one that lost, so John is the one that won the trust of the wildlings, and they basically take him to Mance Rayder. And back at the Fist of the First Men, Sam and the other two characters who I can't remember the names of offhand, find the dragon glass, and I'm pretty sure it's the very actual end scene of season 2. I could be wrong. Or it's generally the end of an episode anyway, is when the Fist of the First Men is essentially swarmed by the White Walkers.
Yes.
And Sam somehow manages to survive, or just generally goes unnoticed, even though you think the way they edited it seems like one does notice him, but it just turns out that they don't.
Yeah.
At the end it kind of looks like they're making eye contact, but he's like, meh, fuck it.
Yeah. Just didn't think it was worth it. So what are your guys' thoughts on... Yeah, so what are your guys' thoughts on this storyline, or just generally the characters involved in it?
Well, I liked this storyline a lot more compared to what was going on with John in season 1, because, like I said earlier, he didn't really get to do that much. It was pretty much all just establishment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really great seeing what was beyond the wall, and seeing what was going on with the wildlings, not just with the ones that are teaming up with Mance Rayder, but also with Craster and his family.
Yeah.
And I think, and I really liked. Lost my train of thought for a second. But one thing I do really like about this one is the introduction of Egret, who's become one of my favorite characters. I think that Rose Leslie was probably one of the best casting choices they made in the whole thing. Like she really does get the character down, and yeah.
I've actually ended up using occasionally the line "You know nothing, Jon Snow" at people, so. And generally like the fact that it's a case of it's not so much that she's not feminine or anything, it's just the fact that to her all she's known is this harsh life, so the idea of dainty little women kind of would make her want to vomit, or just generally, as happens in a later season, she kind of just mocks the idea. So
yeah.
It's funny
Yeah, that,
because it's not so much that she's not feminine at all. It's just that she's had to have a harsh upbringing, so she's a lot like Osha. She's a lot more.
or maybe
Um,
just her, or maybe because of the way she was raised, her ideas of feminine are completely different to the way they are in
yeah,
Westeros or
yeah.
Essos.
It
Mm,
has to
Like,
be. I mean, just look at, like, say, let's just compare women in, like, southern Norway to pretty much people who could be classified as Inuit in the very, very, very far within the Arctic Circle region of Norway.
mm,
You know, the women are very different. You go from these women who are um, at least high class women would be more decent. However, Norway was a bad example because they were allowed to do a bit more than women in England. But um, but you still have women who spend hours on their hair and do this and that. Whereas, Inuit women, they didn't have that luxury. They would go out in the frozen wastelands and they would look for rabbits or seals or
mm.
something to survive. It's like if you're brought up in a harsh land, you really don't have the choice to just kind of be Sansa.
Yeah. And I
yeah,
guess it's just generally also the wildlings, except that women shouldn't just be baby factories like pretty much everyone in Westeros, and well, pretty much anywhere else seem to basically treat women as something to be sold off because, as was brought up before, it's the sort of Middle Ages mindset where marriage was more about getting rid of the woman to make alliances and stuff like that. Um, and up in beyond the wall, it's like they don't really care about any of that. It's more about you would actually be with someone because you actually care about them rather than, oh, we're going to ship you off here because we need to form an alliance with these lot.
Well, you can steal women if you're wild.
yeah, yeah. I was just gonna bring that up because uh, going back to what I was saying about how wildling culture is vastly different to the way things are in Westeros or Essos. Uh,
Mm.
it is a lot more like the Dothraki culture, they where the women seem to be more attracted to strength and the more aggressive warrior types.
Yeah.
Uh, like when Maeve said that about how the way that two wildlings get married is one of them sneaks into their house and steals them away. If if someone in Westeros or even today brought that up, they'd be like, "Oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with you?" But
Yeah.
it's but it's just par for the course up there.
Yeah.
I always have a few
Um,
complaints that someone just came into my house in the middle of the night and dragged me and said, "You are my wife now."
But hey, at
uh,
least the wildling women there pick up a fight.
yeah. Well, I guess that's the point. Like the wildling women can actually defend themselves, whereas most of the women south of the wall and elsewhere pretty much just kind of have to grin and bear it, or
Yeah,
kill, or just kill themselves to prevent getting allowing stuff like that to happen. Um, I'm kind of like, in a way, as far as Sam goes, I'm kind of glad that they gave him more to actually do here rather than just be the token fat guy who gets
hmm
crapped all over. The thing with Gilly is really cute because he doesn't. It really does come off so much as he's just like, "Hooray, a girl's actually talking to me," rather than
yeah,
him necessarily hoping that she's gonna have sex with him. And I would
yeah,
be shocked if she ever did, considering what she's been through.
yeah. Personally, I think Sam and Gilly are like the cutest couple in the show.
They
Mm.
are, and
And the
Yeah.
interesting
I
thing is
think
that I'd actually seen the woman who plays Gilly before in the UK show Skins, which is kind of hilarious because she played a bit of a ditz in that too, I think.
Yeah, was it
But
the guy who played Gendry also from Skins?
I think so.
Hmm.
I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've watched it. I actually, yeah, I think he played like a bit of a druggie in that. So that's a funny way to go.
Yeah.
You guys got any more thoughts on that storyline, or should we move on?
Well, nothing in the storyline in particular, but personally, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think Egret's the hottest girl on the show. And I know that's like a live competition because there's like a lot of gorgeous ladies out there, but there's something about Rose Leslie that, like, not just the way they look, but I also think her voice is really sexy. I have no idea why.
she does have this
Yeah.
sort of swagger to her attitude. I find it really funny that they had someone that's very attractive play, um, play Ygritte, because in the books she was actually kind of homely. I mean, she was attractive enough for John,
Mm-hmm.
but John
Mm.
like pointed out like her crooked overbite and her hair was like chopped off, and
Yeah, I
he
do
thought she was
remember
a
that.
boy at first, and it's like, no, wait. It took me a while to accept Rose Leslie, but no, she played that part really well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
guess
My
the other
favorite
thing
scene.
is they. Hmm,
Yeah, my
you
favorite
go.
scene between the two was when they were huddling up together for warmth, and Eager was just like rubbing her butt against John's crotch.
uh, I guess that's one other thing that kind of, in a way, kind of bugs me that John has already explained before why he doesn't really care whether he has sex or not, but he never brings it up to Egret. That's why it's like, well, I'm a bastard. I don't want to impregnate you and bring another bastard into the world. So, like, yeah, I
Which
don't think
doesn't
he
mean
ever
jack
brings
shit to
that up.
her.
Well, yeah, but like, I guess it would have been interesting to see her reaction to that kind of explanation, whether she's just like, well, I don't give a fuck. I just want to have sex, you stupid idiot. Like, let me. Um, and I guess it's interesting that they didn't try to they were actually practical with it. Like you usually see the argument made of, oh, that like in games and stuff as well, like where oh she shouldn't be wearing that. That wouldn't make sense for what she's doing, and she's completely covered head to toe, and yet a lot of people are quite. I mean, there's a scene in the
Yeah,
next season where she isn't, but it makes sense for that scene. In this case, we only ever really like 99% of the time we see her like so fully clothed that you wouldn't be able to make a figure out.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, moving on from that, let's see which one. I guess we'll go with. You know what? We'll go with the King in the North storyline, as I've essentially called it, which also includes a bit of Renly's camp, but essentially it starts with Robb offering peace to the Lannisters in return for Northern independence, which we later learn gets shot down. Um, Also, Robb realizes that even though he seems to be winning, there's no way he can really win without some more forces. So he sends Theon, who's talked him into trying to get Balon Greyjoy's help. He sends Theon off to try and attempt that, and sends Catelyn to try and negotiate with Renly Baratheon. And Catelyn basically goes to that camp, and we end up with her meeting Brienne, which Brienne is sort of. Brienne's an interesting character in that she became. I'd say she's one of my favorite characters at this point, but anyway, get into that later. She tries negotiating with Renly and then tries, at least attempts to stop Stannis and Renly from fighting, but that doesn't end up working because they're both too greedy and both want the throne. Then, as she's finally won Renly over to help Robb, Renly gets killed by a shadow creature that we previously know was birthed by Melisandre. Yeah. Brienne and Catelyn basically have to flee because otherwise Brienne would be blamed, or just generally both of them would be blamed because there's literally no other explanation that anyone would be able to figure out as to why that happened. And on the way back to the Stark encampment, Brienne essentially offers her services to Catelyn after declining to flat out join the Stark forces. Then meanwhile, while that's all going on, Robb falls, essentially meets and falls for Talissa Magar. And once he learns that Theon has taken Winterfell, basically just sends some Stark forces to retake it and bring Theon back so that Robb can ask him why he did it and then kill him. Jaime does his first escape attempt. I think he technically had done one before, but I think that was season 1. Either that, it was very early season 2. And he was captured again pretty quickly for that. And then he kills one of his cousins and a guard to make a second attempt, but he ends up being recaptured again. And Lord Karstark pretty much just wants his head. And because Catelyn realizes that essentially this is probably going to end badly, she essentially tasks Brienne with taking Jaime back to King's Landing just to get the hell out. And also pretty much just to get her daughters back, because she essentially gets tricked by Peter Baelish back at the Renly's camp that she should do that and she'll get her daughters back, and she falls for it. And Tyrion's given her Ned Stark's remains, essentially, so he can be buried properly. Then we get... just a sec. Okay. Then Robb finds out what Catelyn's done, and she basically becomes a prisoner for the rest of the season and into season 3. And basically Robb falls madly in love with Talissa, and even though Catelyn's this is really a bad idea because you swore it's like you swore an oath to Lord Frey, so if you do this you're basically screwed. And foreshadowing. And basically Robb's just like, well, fuck you, I want to marry her anyway, and does so. So what are your guys' thoughts on that storyline?
I was always taken with the storyline of the King of the North. I really liked the delving into Catelyn's character. She's always been one of my favorites. And Robb, I actually like that Robb didn't fall madly in love with anyone in the books. He was nursed back to health after being wounded by this noble lord's daughter, Jane Westerling, I think was her name.
Yeah.
And basically, he got her pregnant. Or no, he had sex with her, and they think that she might be pregnant. So he doesn't marry her because he's madly in love. He marries her because he's honor bound. And the reason I like that better is because Ned Stark dies because he's honor bound, and you see this sort of recurring theme, at least with the books, throughout the entire family. They keep getting screwed over because they won't play dirty because they're honor bound. They are Starks.
Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, that in a way, yeah, it seems like if they'd gone that way, it probably would have been a better idea. But I guess they figured, well, he's young, we can just make him have a young love scenario, and that'll probably work. Like, I still like the story, I guess, but in a way, it almost does sound like it probably would have been better if he'd essentially been in a way, forced by his own honor to marry rather and break his oath rather than the way it turned out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I almost forgot about that whole plot point until I like started researching it again because, like I said last time, a lot of the plots just kind of started hazing together after a while. But but like you said, I do think it would have fit a lot more thematically if they did for some kind of honor bound reason other than him just being young and in love and stupid, which he never really showed any signs of that before in season 1. And I kind
Yeah.
of get why they try to beef it up more because in the books, everything that Rob does is pretty much off camera. We never get to see him kick ass or take names like we did in the show, and even then they still had to cut corners for that because they were saving up for the Battle of Blackwater. But I think the way in the end, as long as it has the same end results, I think it's okay for them to start taking some liberties because that still what goes to his downfall. Like they said, is his honor. Aside from his duty, is just not him probably not being as brave and wise as the king as everybody thinks him to be.
Yeah.
And that's all I got to say.
Yeah, pretty much aside from that, I generally like Rob's story. I guess it's really funny that most of the times that he'll make a bad decision, his mum is pretty much always telling him not to. Like, even really tells him that he shouldn't try to align himself with anyone, but only really goes along with it because his reasoning at least somewhat makes sense. Like the fact that he'll need more forces and Rob's reasoning for at least attempting to trust the Greyjoys was the fact that he figured he needed ships. Yeah. And of course it comes back to bite him, and even when it does, he decides, well, okay, even though Theon is my friend, he's betrayed me and is holding my brothers hostage, he's a dead man. So he at least rises up to that. And generally I kind of like how, even though Catelyn is a strong woman, they essentially make it that emotionally she's very easily manipulated when you bring her kids up. So
yeah, I did bring it up last time that her love for her family is ultimately what led to her downfall because she would pretty much just let the entire world burn around her if it meant her family being safe.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that go wrong for Starks is because she jeopardizes a lot of their strategies solely for the sake of her kids, which, like I said, fucks everything up. And that just makes her prime target for someone like Peter Baelish because like all he had to do was seal the deal was bring up her daughters as leverage and bring him her dead husband's bones. That was pretty much all they needed.
Yeah. And then, of course, he almost wrecked the situation by trying to come onto her.
Yes!
Which I still find it's like, really, guy? You aided in the death of a husband, now you're like, oh, yes, fate has given us this chance. It's like, you asshole!
Well, Kenley doesn't know that he played a part. I mean,
Yeah.
I think she has her
Well, yeah,
suspicions
she didn't.
on
Yeah,
job.
I think she. Yeah, I think it was more she was angry because he said in her presence that he'd protect Ned, and then basically went against. Obviously, must have gone against that.
Mm.
So even if she doesn't know that he was directly involved, he didn't hold up his end of the bargain.
Right.
Um,
But at the end of the day, it's still kind of scummy for him to just go, "Hey, I brought your dead husband's bones. You want to do it?"
uh, um, and as I was saying before, Brienne has sort of become one of my favorite characters by this point.
Yeah.
Which, like, it is kind of sad that, like, at first when we all know that Renly is gay, but she's like very like,
Hopelessly
oh,
in
he
love with
clearly wasn't. Yeah, like she is like very hard to convince of that. So she's
Yeah.
basically blindly loyal to him out of love, but at
Well,
the
I don't
same
think she's really
time,
blind to. I think she knows that that A, he's gay, and B, he's sleeping with her brother. I think she's just. I think she. I think it's pretty apparent that they that their marriage was strictly political because
mm.
when they tried to do the deed and Renly couldn't get it up, Marjorie basically like, would you like some help? What if I brought my brother in?
Yeah, that was
and
hilarious.
and and I think she was like trying to convince him that to probably like keep it their little secret for the sake of the realm and securing the throne and whatnot.
Mm.
And I do,
Yeah.
and even though it does build up a lot more in later seasons, I do vastly prefer the show Marjorie to book Marjorie because in the books she is a little deceitful, but she does play up the whole dainty little flower facade a little too much. Whereas in here, uh, they show a lot more of her cunning
Mm.
and her and showing that she's able to play the game a lot just as good as anybody else in this.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
I.
thought this, and I think there's a great introduction to her.
One of
Yeah,
the
like
who started.
you can go.
All right. So one of the big advantages that the show has over the book is that you're not stuck in these prospective characters' head. Now there are a lot of prospective characters, so you do get a lot, and I do kind of prefer the books over the television show. However, you do get to see things like Marjorie. You see Marjorie only from the perspective of Sansa, Sansa, Cersei, and
And Catelyn.
Catelyn. Yeah, and so you don't really get to see what you really like. However, in the show, you get scenes that focus just on her. So you get to see that sort of cunning that may still exist in the book Marjorie, but it's clearly evident now that you're actually allowed to get the full picture.
Mm.
Yeah.
Show Marjorie.
Yeah.
And the actress playing her is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
Just.
Natalie Dormer, number 3 in hottest Game of Thrones character.
um,
Daenerys is
since we
number 2.
just since we just went with the King of the North one, sort of briefly, considering it's not really much of a storyline, but I essentially separated it out to its own thing. The Greyjoy storyline. Theon's been sent off to basically win his father over to help Robb. He shows up and accidentally gets into it, or almost really gets into it with his sister, only to find out later, and it ends up being very awkward. Um, and he basically decides, well, okay, bugger it. This is my actual family. I'll stay loyal to them instead of the Starks, even though really, you could argue that he probably should have stayed loyal to the Starks, but at the same time, he probably would have been killed otherwise.
Yeah. If
Going
he
by
did,
how,
he would be dead. However,
yeah,
it didn't really turn out all that well for him anyway.
yeah. um, so they essentially like sort of baptize him into their religion and send him off to essentially raid fishing villages. And being Theon, he's offended and annoyed by this. So one of his fellow Iron Islanders basically kind of tricks, but at the same time just generally talks him into going after a bigger target, and that ends up being Winterfell. Um, and then eventually Theon does manage it, and they take Winterfell, and pretty much just to cement his turn, he ends up beheading Sir Roderick in front of the kids, which is a bit dark, and it takes him like 3 attempts, I'm pretty sure, to actually,
And he has to use his butt.
yeah, just to get the
Yeah,
guy's
I
head
love
off.
that whole scene, especially in contrast to all the other beheading scenes. Like the scene in the pilot episode where Ned Stark was beheading an escaped Watchman, he was able to do it in just like one clean chop.
One foul swoop.
Yeah.
Yeah, in one fell swoop. And whereas Theon, he had to like keep hacking and bludgeoning, and it took him like 5 tries, and he couldn't even.
Mm. Yeah. Um. Essentially, then after that, and I think it was that. Oh no, wait, yeah. Theon is essentially tricked by Osha, and they manage to her, the kids, and Hodor manage to escape. Since they aren't able to find them, they end up killing 2 orphan boys and passing them off as the Stark children just to keep everyone in line. After that, Yara shows up and basically tells him that he's been ordered to come home, and Theon, being too prideful, basically says that he's going to hold Winterfell because he's essentially been told that if you have, I think it was about if you have a decent amount of men, you can hold it fairly long. But Yara essentially reveals that she legitimately cares about Theon and doesn't want him to die. So it's not just that their father wants him to return. It's that she is pretty much well aware that he's probably going to die. So wants to talk him out of it, but isn't successful. Then the Starks show up, or at least the Stark bannermen show up, and annoy the absolute shit out of Theon. And then finally, when it looks like they're gonna do something, and Theon gives a bit of a speech, his own men basically knock him out. One shoves a spear into Maester Lewin, and they basically just go, well, this was fun, but it's time to go home. So they give up Theon, and they just I'm pretty sure it turns out that they end up dying, but we don't really know that at this point, and we just assume that they kind of abandoned the place after setting it aflame. So yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I really like this story. I think the big overarching theme for Theon's story in season 2 was his conflict between who his real family was. Was it the was it the Greyjoys who he was born to but was taken away from and hasn't seen in like 20 years, or was it the Starks who were basically holding him captive but treated him really well, and they were respectful and all that, even though technically he still is their prisoner.
Yeah.
And that conflict is basically what drives him to make all these stupid decisions, and his and always conflicting about where his loyalties lie, what's the right thing, can he really prove himself to anyone?
Yeah. And even like near the end of the storyline, uh, Maester Lewin is almost able to talk him out of it, but Theon's essentially reserved himself to the fact that he's already gone too far and it's too late to turn back.
Yeah.
Basically, accepts his fate.
Mhm.
But of course, as we know, that he doesn't just get a simple death. He gets a lot worse than that.
Oh yeah.
Nobody deserves what he gets. Not even Joffrey. Okay, maybe a little bit,
Maybe Joffrey. Maybe Joffrey.
but
But yeah, no, I was the Theon's storyline. It was not only his where my allegiances actually lie. There was a lot of that, but he was a prideful little shit from episode 1, and that was
yeah.
big. I'm not some weak prisoner, and you can't treat me like a woman, and blah blah blah. So a lot of it was him trying to appease his pride as well as earn his father's love, which he never does. I mean, yes, Asha, Yara, I guess her name is. Yara comes back
Let's
for
just
him.
call him Yara for the sake of let's just call her Yara.
Yeah. It's why they do. No, I understand why they did that because you can't have an Asha and an Asha. It's too similar.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no. So his sister comes back for him, but we know that his father does not give a shit. So
yeah, and like,
he's there now.
And like, really, it comes off as the only reason Balon Greyjoy kind of wants him back is because he's the only. Because this is, the way it is. It's like, well, he's the only boy I've got left, so he's the only one that can really carry on the family name. And it's more so about that than actually giving a shit about him as a person, because he's basically moved on to Yara already.
Yeah. By the way, I think her introduction in this show is probably one of the best character introductions in the entire scene because they just like meet randomly at the port town, and while they're riding up to Pike, he's like trying to sweet talk him, and he's like putting his hand down her shirt, and he does that in the book too. But the whole like I was watching this with a bunch of friends, one of whom never really read the book, and I was just kind of like trying to stifle my laughter because I really wanted to see his reaction.
I guess what would have made that scene a bit awkward is that apparently they originally offered the part of Yara to Alfie Allen's actual sister, Lily Allen, and
oh my god!
And she turned it down for the exact reasons you said.
I'm done. I quit.
That would have. I think you broke Graham. You broke Graham. Thank you.
They should have done that. All right. If I ever get a time machine or an alternate reality machine or whatever, first thing I'm going back and convincing the casting director to make that decision.
Well, it wasn't so much the casting director.
Screw saving JFK. We need the Allen siblings grubbing each other.
Okay. Okay, pretty much just to move on, we'll go to the Bran storyline, which is fairly simple because it's so I'll sum it up fairly quickly. Essentially, Bran's trying to figure out why he's started to have these visions of the three-eyed raven and all of that. One of my dot points literally just says, filler about Bran now being Lord of Winterfell. Then after a while, Theon shows up. Then all that other stuff that we just mentioned happens. Bran, Rickon, Hoda, and Osha essentially escape, but then as Osha says, they essentially double back to Winterfell and hide in the crypt. And essentially, they finally come back out after Winterfell has basically been decimated, and they find Maester Luwin in the Godswood dying, and he basically just tells them to go to the wall because Jon will be there and he'll have some protection at least until the war is over.
They
And
split at that point, right? Yes, Master Lewin's dying, but
yeah,
Rickon and Bran split up at that point, right?
Yeah, Asha mercy kills him at the end.
yeah. The Hodor takes the kids away, and he makes Osha come back and basically kill him quickly because he doesn't want to. Like she's even like, tell me where I can find you milk of the poppy, and he's like, he doesn't want it, and basically just looks at a knife and basically like, make it quick, so the kids don't notice, and yeah, basically asks for a mercy killing.
Yeah.
And she obliges, and that's essentially the end of that story. Their storyline is basically just them heading more further north to the wall. So I think I'll just start this one off. As far as this goes, it's like it is fairly incidental, and there are some nice moments, but generally, for the most part, I didn't really care much about the storyline in retrospect compared to everything else, because it's essentially, for the most part, it feels like they were just kind of trying to stretch it out with some of that stuff where Bran is just being Lord of Winterfell. But once the kids' lives are in danger, you start to care in that. Like once Theon shows up, because it's like, oh shit, this is Game of Thrones. They might actually die. Like I think I think I actually fell for it when Theon tries to pass off the orphan boys as burnt corpses as the Stark children, because we don't know yet. That's like the end of an episode, and then it's like the next. I think it's either the next episode or like an episode later is when we find out that that is not the case. But it's a nice misdirect, because like the first episode of season 1 ends with Bran getting pushed out a window, and we don't know if he's alive or dead until the next episode. And in this one, it's another case where this time we think Bran and Rickon are dead, and then it's like, nope, they're not. They're safe. It was just two innocent. Like, and you still feel bad because it's like it was two completely innocent children that just basically victims of this conflict.
Yeah, still a dick thing to do.
And like the kids now have to essentially slowly grow up, because they do hear Maester Luwin and Osha talking about this. So they have to deal with the fact that those kids died so they could be alive, and generally they see the beheading of Sir Roderick, so they've seen some shit. And hell, like Bran's had to see two siblings have sex, so he's seen quite a lot.
The Stark children don't get to be children very long.
Nope.
And a lot of the "You are now Lord of Winterfell" is him, bonding with Maester Luwin so we could feel a deeper impact. I feel like when he dies, and then also we get a lot of his dreams, which we know now. I think we know now. Yeah, no, the show is caught up to that point, which we know now has led up to a very rewarding sort of fulfillment. Bronn has basically become like a master druid.
Yeah.
Generally, I like how Osha went from in the first season just being sort of very reluctantly at Winterfell to growing to actually have affection for the kids and then thus actually wants to get them out of there.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's not just sort of Maester Lewin kind of ordering her to and she sort of reluctantly does it or something like that. Or whatever. It's just that she legitimately grows to care about these kids. Instead of it being sort of grey area where she's like, well, I could just, sell them off to someone and get the hell out, but, any more thoughts on that, guys? Or
Not really. This was a pretty short storyline.
Yeah. In that case, let's see, what have we got left? I kind of want to save a specific one to last, so we'll move on to the storyline that I've essentially named for this, just for the sake of this, Stannis' quest. Basically starts with Stannis has basically got the message from Ned, that he's essentially the rightful next in line to the throne because Joffrey is an incest bastard. And as
among
just
other things.
yeah, and generally as part of his goal to that, he is seduced, I guess, by Melisandre, since we kind of come in after he's already given himself over to her. Yeah. Yeah, and after basically just giving himself over to this new religion, one of his maester essentially tries to poison Melisandre, and we realize just how much power this woman has because she obviously realizes that there must be something wrong with her, but she drinks it anyway, and it doesn't affect her at all. So, and she just sort of calmly watches as this guy just starts convulsing on the floor and dying because he poisoned the wine and just decided, well, I'm taking her down with me, and it doesn't end up working. I forget his name, but Davos recruits that pirate.
Salador San. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Which, even though it's like one of his few appearances this season, I do kind of love that scene. Just because of the interactions.
Yeah. I love the actor that they got to play Salador, and basically all of his lines were really great. Like Davos' son was there, and he's like, "You think they're just gonna let you rape the queen?" And he's like, "I'm not going to rape her. I'm going to fuck her."
Fuck her.
It's like, what? You think she's just gonna let you?
And he was like, "I could be very persuasive."
Yeah, it's like, I haven't tried to fuck you before, or something like that.
Yeah.
Sort of implying that the characters are either open to that sort of thing or just generally might be bisexual. And then, after a while, Stannis is basically convinced purely by "I can bear you a son" to fuck Melisandre.
Yeah, which doesn't happen in the book, by the way. And I just kind of like, for me, that scene was just kind of weird because, they just like do it right there on the table. But I love the way that Stannis just keeps trying to do it in the missionary position because Stannis is like this serious stick in the mud. And he's like, of course he'd do it that way.
Right.
Melisandre is always though.
Yeah.
Double entendre.
So after that, Stannis tries to make Renly basically surrender and give back the bannermen he essentially stole from him. And when that doesn't work, Davos has to take Melisandre ashore, and she gives birth to the shadow creature that we previously mentioned, and that
Yes.
kills Renly. Um,
Yeah, during that scene, both when I watched the show and read that chapter in the book, when it was happening,
Oh.
I was just like, nope, 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 nope.
and the funny
I
thing
was
is,
like, I
probably would
remember
have
like,
been.
yeah, I remember like seeing this cartoon where they were like doing recaps of the episode, and during that scene, it ended with Davos just rolling away as fast as he can. It's like, oh no, wait, get this bitch away from me, Stannis, Stannis.
And I guess the thing is that probably would have been. I would argue that even though I haven't read the books, that probably would have been harder to read than it would have been to watch because you have to picture it in your head. And and as has been said by authors before, it's usually like more effective when you've got to picture what happens because you're more likely to come up with a more fucked up image than they could ever paint in your mind.
Oh
Well, it
yeah.
literally clawed out of her. It wasn't like this bulbous, smoky thing. It was like a physical form, shadow thing, falling out of her. It describes the nails just. It's yeah. It's like I'm adopted.
Yeah, and like I said before, the whole her having sex with Stannis was an invention of the show. In the books, she's just suddenly pregnant out of nowhere.
Isn't that implied that they thought? I thought it was implied because it is
Well, it's
Stannis'
implied, but
shadow.
never. Well, it's implied, but never really said that straight up.
Yeah. Well, it seems like in a way you probably wouldn't have to straight up say it because, like, well, it seems like she'd be able to convince him to one way or another.
Yeah.
But yeah, after Renly dies, all the Bannermen basically just swarm back to Stannis, and Davos convinces Stannis not to take Melisandre to King's Landing with them, and as in Melisandre's opinion, as a result, they essentially lose at the Battle of Blackwater, which they're doing fine at first, and then the Lannister and Tyrell forces show up and force them to retreat after already being damaged because of the wildfire that Tyrion. Yeah, which killed Davos' son and left. They basically made it so Davos was essentially left for dead.
Yeah.
And has to be convince someone to convince that pirate to take him back. But I forget if that's like early season 3 or not. And if we're supposed to basically believe that he's dead, because that's kind of the funny thing is a lot of these characters you could believe just kind of died unless they actually show up again pretty quick.
Yeah.
And essentially, from what I can recall, Stannis' story essentially ends with Melisandre reassuring him that this isn't over yet and gets him to. I think that's when the sort of looking into the flames thing happens, and even he realizes, okay, this ain't over yet. We're gonna do this one way or another. So did you guys have any more thoughts on that, aside from the ones that we've already brought up?
Not really. I am afraid that I will have to get going. So,
Yep.
next time I will not double, triple, quadruple plan things, and I'll actually be here for an entirety of a podcast. I'd like to thank you guys very much. You all made very good points. Of course, mine were the best. And
yeah,
the
like
night
we'll
is
pretty
dark
much
full of
just.
terrors. And apparently cold because winter is coming. Actually, great. All right.
Okay.
See you guys.
See ya.
All right. See ya.
Okay.
Anyway. But
As
yeah,
far
I
as
think
yeah,
I pretty much I think we pretty much covered everything in that.
yeah, pretty much as far as characters go, Stannis would normally, I guess, would be a character that bothered me unless it was the fact that he was supposed to be written this way and he was. So in a way
Hmm.
that made it work, and just how he's acted makes it work because he's because basically he's just like a stone-faced soldier, so it makes sense. And in that sense, it makes sense that it would kind of be hard to manipulate him, but also Melisandre manages to make it work, and in some cases Davos kind of manages it because he appeals to him as a man and as like a father and all that sort of stuff, and kind of gets in his ear a bit, but not really all that much aside from Melisandre. And generally Davos is a character that I really like because he's another one of those came from nothing, helped Stannis out as we find out, and somehow rose this far and is apparently hated by a lot of people for it in this world anyway. But generally is making it work and is kind of in over his head
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah, I really like Davos too.
Hmm. From what I've heard, it's funny watching the episode of Blackwater back with the commentary on, which I did when I was originally watching this, and George R. R. Martin basically pointing out that there's actually uh, Davos has more than one son. He actually has like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah,
Just
in the
generally
books he
has
does.
quite a lot of
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, but only one shows up in
Yeah,
the show, basically just to cut back on casting and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
And plus,
You know,
only like 1 or 2 of them show up in the books anyway. The rest of them are just back at
yeah,
home.
yeah, yeah. The rest are at home with their mother. In a way, going by what he said, I figure that in a way they probably could have like cast like one more and just have it be excuse me, just have it be like the two, since apparently one was just Stannis' squire. Even if he also just got killed off,
Hmm.
where it's like he just goes into battle with Stannis and just doesn't make it back, or like he ends up the same way. Is it Mathos? Mathos, yeah,
Yeah.
ends up the same way he ends up, where basically just a wildfire gets him.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I guess there isn't really much to say. Melisandre, like, does fairly well, I think. Like, she does her part, and the actress is really great.
Yeah.
Because, like, I like how like, it's not so much necessarily determination so much as her blind faith is portrayed in a way that is fairly refreshing, in that she's very calm about pretty much everything. There's like a few times where
Yeah.
something will catch her off guard, but otherwise she's very calm. Like, no, no, no. Even though you failed that one time, Stannis, don't worry. You're gonna succeed eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. I really did like the uh, the confidence that Carice Van Houten brought to her, and I do really like how she basically just has this calm demeanor throughout everything, and she kind of talks
Mm.
about like how everything is part of this one greater plan. And even though she is obviously a huge zealot, she's not really like super psycho or anything.
Yeah, she's not like the sort of TV evangelist or something that we'd be used to. Or
Right.
something. She's more like a cult leader, I guess, in that she's very
Yes.
calm
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah. Which is funny because at first you think it is just a cult, and it's like, oh, and you even have other characters basically say as much. Well, there's like all these old gods, and then there's like 7 new ones, and blah blah blah, and all those, like, a bunch of other characters just basically saying, oh yeah, we'll believe it when we see it. And Melisandre's is the only god that we know has directly must have something, like must actually exist, or just as generally something else behind this, that she's able to survive the poison and just generally manage to do all this other shit like the shadow creature, and it's like, okay, even though Davos is basically like, well, she's a witch woman, we should get rid of her. She's just gonna fuck this up somehow, or maybe turn on us or something like that. But Stannis is like, well, hey, it's proven to be legit. We might as well stick with her.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Uh,
and it definitely does help that he was successfully converted to her religion, and it's not really it is more of a religion than a cult, because over in
mm,
Essos the Lord of Light religion is actually this really big thing, and
yeah.
and since Game of Thrones does take a lot from history, the conflict between that and Westeros is kind of like the conflict between the Romans and Christians
Mm,
uh, back 2,000 years ago, or something, or just
yeah.
like any conflict in general between religions. But
Mm. Well, yeah, even like generally, if you go back further than that, like ancient times, where pretty much every civilization had their own deities,
mhm.
or even really now, because there's still quite a lot of religions around. So,
Yeah,
um, even like that. Uh, moving on, we'll probably just cover the King's Landing stuff, but I will admit that I didn't, and just so we could get as much as we did so far done before Maeve had to leave, because she did tell us beforehand, and just so people know, she didn't just randomly decide to drop out. Um, I didn't end up having time because I left it so late to write down uh, stuff for the King's Landing thing, so I'm basically going to have to go by memory. Um, it basically starts off with Joffrey's birthday, which I'm pretty sure is the first scene of the first episode, and
yeah,
we get to see. I'm gonna have to remember his name very quickly.
yeah.
Sir
There's
Dontos.
this one.
Sir
Yeah,
Dontos. Thank God I remembered that. I think it's because he shows up again later, so I was able to remember him
he
from
shows
that.
up late and he shows up drunk.
Yeah. He shows up late and drunk, and Joffrey's essentially going to have him killed, but Sansa basically saves him by saying that death is, like, in her own way, like, sort of trying to manipulate him, says that death is too good and that he should just be a fool. And Joffrey goes along with it. So Dontos essentially like thanks her because otherwise he was going to be waterboarded with wine. So you know, he's like essentially that's what that seemed to be to me, was essentially like to
Yeah, I never
resemble
thought of it that way, but you're right.
waterboarding. Uh, I mean, like not exactly, but generally, the way
Yeah,
it's
still.
sort of done in that way. And I only really bring that up because it's important for when we get to a later season. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have bothered mentioning Sir Dontos at all. But from then, we pretty much get Tyrion showing up, putting Joffrey in his place, especially after uh, Rob's had a few more victories, and she he basic Joffrey basically starts humiliating her in front of everyone, and Tyrion is the only one that stands up to him, because really, in a way, it seems that he's the only one that can, because when uh, Cersei tries to, uh, either in very late season one or just generally any time she tries to
Yeah, it
convince
was
him to
at the
do
first
something in
episode.
season. Yeah.
It was at the first episode of season 2. Like
Mm.
he says something that kind of hints that he knows about the rumors between about her and Jamie, and then she slaps him and he's like, "What you did was just punishable by death. You'll
Yeah.
never do that again." And I was like, "Oh my god, fuck you!" And then he like orders like every bastard in King's Landing to be killed because he hears the rumors about about all of Robert's bastards, and he just kills them all just to be safe. And
Yeah.
then he does the thing with Tyrion's birthday present.
Yeah.
And by the way, how much do you want to bet he jacked off to that?
I would not be surprised. Like as soon as he hands over the scepter sort of thing,
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, I'm betting that he I guess as long as he could hold the crossbow with one hand, with one arm, because he probably would have done that. Because that wouldn't surprise me. Like,
No, if I was directing that scene, the way I would have done it was during like when he was like telling her to hit him harder and harder, you'd probably like he'd be holding the crossbow with one hand, cut back between the prostitutes hitting each other, him holding the crossbow, and he probably just had his face where he's like, and and then like. And then he'd probably like right at the climax he would shoot the crossbow, the bolt would barely miss them, he'd be like, whoops, my finger slipped.
Or if anything, really, like as he's telling her to hit her harder, and I'm pretty sure that's when it cuts away finally.
Yeah.
Just have him sort of slowly move his hand down, like his one free hand down to his pants. Because really it would make sense, because he obviously is a sadist, so him actually literally getting off on that would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I guess considering his age, they probably thought it would be a bit iffy, so they didn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's like a scene later where even Cersei brings us up like, great, you just like all you seem to have done is just kind of made him worse. And it's like, well, it's better than your attempts. And like Cersei basically admits that she doesn't have any control over him anymore, if she ever did. And
yeah,
and they try to have a moment, and they just fail horribly.
Yeah, because I think Tyrion's whole mindset with sending the prostitute is like he said he was like, maybe it would help him relax because like, hey, who doesn't love whores? But going back to Tyrion, he's basically just been owning this entire season, like both in the show and in the book. I think him becoming the acting king for the brief amount of time that he was probably the best thing that happened during the War of the Five Kings, because he's just basically running shit, not letting anybody interfere, keeping everybody in place, and everybody kind of like knows what he's up to, so they just decide to gang up on him and screw him over because he's Tyrion.
And even like the first time he shows up at the small council meeting, and Cersei's kind of like, wait, what the hell are you doing here? And he just had this smug look on his face because he knows exactly what's going on, and she has no control over it. And she's like, she thinks that he must have manipulated Tywin into doing this. And quite rightly, Tyrion points out that if he was able to manipulate Tywin, he'd have a lot more power than he already... Like, he'd have a lot more power by now.
Yeah.
Than just being named acting hand of the king.
But yeah, like I really love how his first order of business as acting hand is pretty much getting rid of all the people who were basically screwing him and everybody else over. Like one of the first scenes when he was talking to Janos Slynt, the captain of the City Watch, and he was talking about how he basically just let Ned Stark die, and when Janos was like, "Are you trying to question my honor?" and he's like, "I'm not questioning your honor, Janos. I'm denying its existence." Like, I love that line.
Yeah.
And I really
and then ships him off to the wall.
Yeah. And the other scene where he finds out that someone on the small council is basically a mole for Cersei, and
Yeah.
he tries to weed them out by telling them like different little lies. And I love the way that
Mm.
scene is framed,
Yeah, yeah.
like the
How
way
it
it was
starts
edited,
off.
how it keeps
Yeah.
cutting back and forth between him telling the same lie with little variations between, and
Mm,
yeah, it was just great. I love that scene.
yeah. And even like, yeah, and it's like, it's in a way, it's kind of obvious that it's going to be Pycelle, but
Mhm.
once it is revealed, and what I find funny is, had one of the other ones blabbed, then it would have kind of complicated it a bit if more than one of them had. But like, if someone else had, it seemed that he was determined to pretty much marry her off to whoever she had to whoever he had lied to, like whoever the person was that he lied to, because he told, I think it was Varys is the one he
Yeah,
told about Theon,
yeah.
and uh,
Let's see. He told
I
Pycelle
forget.
that he told Pycelle that he was gonna marry Marcella off to Tristan Martell. He told
Mm,
Varys that he was gonna marry her off to Theon Greyjoy, and he told Littlefinger that he was gonna marry her off to Robin Arryn.
yeah. Um, and even then, like, and of course later on when Littlefinger figures out what happened, um, Tyrion uses him again to, well, for one, generally to get the Vale back into to attempt to get the Vale back into the fold, and
Mm-hmm.
two, to try and get some sort of, well, I guess it was, yeah, it's like some sort of deal going with the Starks, and eventually ends up with Peter Baelish just essentially manipulating Catelyn. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
I think, yeah, like,
I think the deal they made was that that if that if Littlefinger returned Ned Stark's bones to Catelyn, then Tyrion would make him Lord of the Vale. I think that was it.
yeah, it was either that or he was going to give him. It was either
No, he was
Harrenhal
going to
or
give it.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Harrenhal.
he was going to Harrenhal, and then he gets it later anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets it like right at the end of the season from Joffrey for helping get the Tyrells into play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pretty much the rest of it, aside from the riot that happens in Flea Bottom after Marcella has been shipped off, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, which that scene was interesting because you really didn't know if any of the main characters were actually going to die, because this is a show that will get you with that. And they all pretty much manage to escape except Sansa, and she almost gets raped. And
And
God,
then
that
the
is a
Hound
hard
comes in
scene
and
to
saves her.
watch. Yeah, and then the
Yeah,
Hound
and then the
saves her,
Hound.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and then like you are
And
so thankful that like, I know a lot of people don't like Sansa, but even if I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily care too much about a character at this point, I didn't want to see her character raped. So it
Yeah.
was just like, oh, thank God, someone saved her.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. And yeah, that whole scene was really great too. Like one of the big moments from that really got me was when a bunch of townspeople were pulling down the Septon, and they just like swarmed him like a bunch of zombies, and one of them was able to like tear his arm off.
yeah.
But the crown
and then
jewel
of
of that
course we
entire
got,
fucking scene
yeah.
was when somebody threw the cow shit at Joffrey's face. It was like, can we play that on a
uh,
loop for like
mm.
ever, please?
Well, that's the funny thing. The other takeaway scene from that is when they finally get back into the castle and Tyrion just starts going right off at Joffrey and then just slaps him right across the face like 2 or 3
Yeah.
times. And I'm pretty sure there is a video of that on a loop. And like replaying it and that, and it's just like, that is satisfying because even though Joffrey, really, he could probably get away with doing Tyrion in because of all of this.
Yeah. He
He
was able to
just
shut
sort
him
of
up.
takes it. Yeah. Like, I guess because he figures he'll get it back at him some other way or something, which we find out he essentially does, he just generally lets it happen. And it's like, it's interesting because he just lets it happen. Tyrion's like one of the few people he'll kind of essentially let get away with it, that sort of thing, for some reason. And probably because of Tyrion's position at the time. And then later we have the whole the wildfire thing where Bronn basically just shrugs it off as that ain't gonna work, and Tyrion goes the complete other way and actually basically says, "Well, you're gonna keep making it, but you're making it for me now."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that
fun bit
leads
of
in.
trivia. The guy who played the alchemist who created all the wildfire is Roy Dotrice, who I think I'm pronouncing it that way. But anyway, he's the guy who does the audiobooks for the book series.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Um, and then we pretty much go into the Battle of Blackwater Bay, and
Yeah.
because pretty much just skip, because like most of it is just kind of lead up to that battle anyway for the King's Landing stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and we have the wildfire go off, and what is interesting is I've seen the pyromancer essentially praised. I think it might have just been by George R. R. Martin because he does a commentary for that episode, or it
Mhm.
might even been like another thing that I'd seen where they actually praise his bit of acting where he's just in total awe and joy that this actually, one, that this was being used, and two, that it was that
That
it
it worked.
actually worked. Yeah, and he's just like marvel. He's like, hooray! Something I did worked. And it was just like such a small role, but he really made it count. Um,
Yeah.
and generally, and then we get like the Hound runs off after seeing a man on fire. And
Yeah.
just generally all the fire everywhere on the beach, and like you wouldn't really blame it.
Yeah.
Um,
He's like, fuck this noise.
yeah.
And then he just tells them all, it's like, fuck the city, fuck the King's Guard, fuck the king, fuck you, I'm out, deuces.
Yeah. And basically after that, Joffrey loses all heart. Like he's been bragging that uh, they say Stannis never smiles. I'm going to give him a red smile, and all this just talking himself up like he's going to be. And even Sansa sort
Yeah.
of mocks him about it, where he's like, "Oh yes, of course you'll be in the vanguard because you're so brave and strong and all this." And he's just trying to save face by having a go at her.
Hmm.
And eventually, as was pointed out on the commentary, it is actually interesting to think that he does want to. It seems like Joffrey does want to stay there. Like even he's like asking Tyrion, like genuinely, oh, "What do I do?" um, and then Lancel shows up and is basically like, "The Queen wants you to come back to the Red Keep," and it's like,
Hmm.
"Does she have a?" And it's like, specifically, Joffrey's trying to find a way out, or like, but Lancel doesn't give it to him. It's like, does she have like an urgent reason for me to actually leave the battle? And he just ends up leaving anyway, and Tyrion basically has to take up the responsibility and manages to fire the men up and basically take them out, and they managed to fend off the small force that was going after the Mudgate, only to and like set uh, the ram on fire. And then there's a funny moment where they turn around and a bunch of like a bunch of other men of Stannis' forces show up, and Tyrion's just like, "Oh fuck me," and we end up. It pretty much looks like they've lost. and Tyrion gets slashed across the face
and
by
then
one of the
and then
King's
his squire
Guard,
comes in
and
and
yeah,
and then
which
Podrick comes in, stabs him through the face, and saves the day.
yeah, that's fucking amazing. That's like that caught me off guard the first time I saw it. From what I can recall, I was just like, "Whoa, holy shit!" Like he shoves that all the way through his face, and like when Tyrion sort of starts bleeding and falls down, and Podrick catches him, and it's just like I must admit this, I actually almost cried because I thought Tyrion was gonna die. Because as I said before, I haven't read the books in that, so I
Mhm.
could have easily assumed that he would have died, and like thank God he didn't. But it's just
Yeah,
so easy to when the characters in this are in mortal danger, you take it seriously unless you don't like the character because like pretty much anyone could die at any time. Um,
yeah. And
and-
and what I also really liked about that episode was like what was going on inside the castle while the battle was going on
yeah,
outside.
yeah,
Like like during the while they were all prepping, Tyrion and Sansa briefly crossed paths, and throughout the whole series, Sansa was just basically telling everybody that I'm in love with King Joffrey. I'm in love with King Joffrey, even though everybody knew it was bullshit, and she was just saying it to save face. But
yeah.
one of my favorite lines from that episode was when she came up to Tyrion and was like, "I shall pray for your, I shall pray for your return, as I pray for King Joffrey's." And I was like, "Oh, snap!"
uh,
But but I also really like the scenes in the Red Keep where Cersei, Sansa, and all the women
yeah,
were being
yeah.
kept, and Cersei was like getting more and more drunk, and she was like, "Hey, that guy, he's not there to protect us. He's there to kill us if
Mm.
Stannis' men ever get there. Because if he does, everybody's gonna get raped. You're gonna get raped. You're gonna get raped. You're gonna get super raped."
Yeah, like I generally kind of like that. How at first she's kind of just putting on a facade, like, oh yeah, oh no,
Yeah,
actually no. Even really, then she's just kind of like, well, of course I bloody did this. I'm expected to. It's like
yeah.
as you will be.
But it's also important to note that she's like getting progressively more and more drunk
Yeah, yeah.
as the
So she
battle
just
goes
like
on.
sort of yeah, the facade like completely breaks, and she's just like, well, actually, he's just here to kill us in case so we don't get raped.
Yeah,
Um, and so Shay is basically like, yeah, you need to get the hell out of here so Ellen Payne doesn't kill you.
yeah,
And then we have the moment with the Hound where he's gone back into the castle because he offers to take Sansa back to her family. And God, this is one of the few times I hate Sansa, and it's not really her fault. It's just because like the story in a way really wouldn't work if she did. But
yeah,
just the fact that she says no and that she stays there when she could potentially die, it's like just go. Like at the same time, you can go, well, okay, maybe uh, even though like he admits, no, I won't harm you and I won't do anything to you. I mean, if he saved her from being raped and didn't rape her himself, of course he's not going to do anything like that. Because, well, as he points out, I think in the later season he's not really so much into that. It's killing is his thing. He
hmm
doesn't really seem to give much of a shit about sex from what we see. Um, so really, she could have gone with him, but for plot convenience, she kind of has to stay behind.
hmm
And there's the nice little scene right at the end of the ninth episode where Cersei is trying to comfort Tommen and essentially also is getting ready to kill both of them
hmm
rather than see Tommen get killed or just generally enslaved, perhaps, or something to that effect. And
Right.
then in comes Tywin and Lawrence, and basically like, well, we won. um, and
Yeah, I don't know if you
then
know this, but 15% of the entire season's budget actually went into that episode.
yeah, like from what I remember, that's why uh, I think they generally held over the show's budget overall, because I think that was the reason why. Yeah, it was like like late season 1. That's why that battle was like I'd like to think that that's also why that battle that was supposed to happen
Hmm.
that involved Tyrion at the end of season 1 didn't
No,
happen
they
as
were already given
well.
their
Just so
no,
they
they
could.
were already given their money for that season, and I think they
Ah,
just like
okay.
didn't have enough to have a full scale battle.
Mm,
But for season 2, they were pretty much saving the money. They were saving the money for that one.
yeah. Um, which in a way, like it paid off because
Yeah.
it's like it just shows that it is possible to do as long as you plan it well enough. Because from what I can tell, they did get an action sort of director to actually do that episode. So
Hmm.
they had someone that had some experience with it, and they were smart enough not to try and overstep their boundaries too much. Something tells me they probably did almost, if not actually, break their budget, but at the same time, they worked with what they had, so you never see like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men at once. You'd only really
Hmm.
see like, or like if it's like close to 100, it's like all up, not 100 on one side, 100 on the other.
Right.
um, and because like you never really see more than I'd say 50 people in 50 extras in one location at once. Maybe
Mhm.
aside from when they're fighting outside of the Mudgate.
Yeah.
Um, and at the, yeah, like, uh, so overall, thoughts on that storyline is like, I like a lot of the stuff from it, but as a storyline, it is kind of like just kind of a slow build, and then the Blackwater happens, and it's luckily the payoff is worth it, I
Yeah.
guess is the point.
Yeah, I
Which,
agree.
yeah, and I actually give them credit for always sort of, for the most part, doing this sort of thing where the major event of the season takes place in the ninth episode, and the 10th episode acts as a sort of epilogue, rather than them having to do that uh, in the next season.
Hmm. I think that's kind
Uh,
of how they always do it because the way it goes is like episode 9 is like the big game changing showstopper moment, and then
yeah,
episode 10 is just setting everything up for the next season.
yeah. Like in the yeah, so like pretty much the this storyline ends with um uh Tyrion being relegated somewhere else because now that his father's and now that Tywin's shown up, he's taking his place as Hand of the King.
Hmm.
And Peter Baelish is given Harrenhal, and everyone's sort of given their place and stuff. And Marjorie uh, is betrothed to Joffrey because they basically go, well, Sansa is essentially a traitor's daughter, and her brother is rebelling. So you can, as far as we're concerned, you can get away with marrying someone else. So he's like, and at first she's like, hooray! And like Sansa's just
And
like,
then
oh, thank
Littlefinger
you.
comes in like, nope,
Yeah,
you're not out of the woods
like,
yet.
yeah. So yeah, good stuff within the storyline overall.
Hmm.
Generally an entertaining build-up and a definitely worth it payoff.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure makes it that there's only one storyline that I haven't, or at least full storyline that I haven't really covered yet, because I specifically wanted to leave it till last because it's arguably my favorite, and that is the storyline that I've referred to as Arya Goes North.
Yeah.
Where essentially she's continuing. When we last left Arya, she was being taken to the wall just to be safe. Sort of going with a bunch of people that are being sent to the Night's Watch and posing as the guy. They get stopped initially by the Gold Cloaks, who Arya thinks are looking for her, but it turns out they're actually looking for Gendry. And they come back later, and Yoren, the Night's Watchman who was leading them all, is killed in a fight, and Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie, which I remembered his name after having to write this stuff, and all the other lot are taken to Harrenhal. Gendry almost dies, but then Tywin shows up and becomes one of the best characters the show has, with just this one scene, really, where he just has a go at all his soldiers for being so stupid, killing off people that they could basically just be using as essentially slaves. Like, just goes, okay, it just looks at Gendry and it's like, okay, what's your profession? Blacksmith. There you go. Put him to work as a blacksmith. And it's like, Arya talks up or speaks up, or someone has a go at her, and it's like, well, you lot are idiots. This one's a girl. It's like, what's a girl doing traveling as a boy? And it's like, it's easier to survive or something. And he kind of essentially, starting from that, it's like calls her a smart girl and that, and then generally over the course of their little arc, he basically seems to grow a bit fond of her, like not terribly fond, I guess, like enough that he'd probably still do away with her if he had to. But generally, they sort of get some sort of respect for each other, even though Arya clearly still wants him dead. She gets to.
Yeah, I really loved. Yeah, I really loved the banter between Tywin and Arya. Like he does catch on pretty quickly that she's not a commoner, that she's actually highborn, but he never really catches on to the fact that she's actually Arya Stark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Peter Baelish shows up and basically almost immediately realizes who she is.
Yeah.
And
then
it's funny because she keeps trying to sort of hide her face in that, but it doesn't work.
And then there's the whole bit with Jaqen H'ghar, who Arya saved from burning to death earlier, and basically as thanks, he offers to kill 3 people for him, and she does kill like 2 people.
Yeah.
And when they're like trying to make their little prison break, she tries to get him to kill Tywin Lannister. And throughout the whole thing, he's like referring to himself as like in the 5th person. He always refers to himself as like a man. And when he says he can't do it in the amount of time that she needs, he says, "Okay, then kill yourself." And I love the part where he's like, "Unname me." Like, I love how he's able to make him break that.
He just, it's like, and it's like, especially because pretty much the entire other time he's comes off as pretty calm, and then just this one time it's like, oh shit. And then she essentially tricks him in a way. Like, I don't think she ever actually intended to do that, but she basically did it as a way to goad him into doing what she wanted, which was ultimately that he ends up killing every single guard that's still left there, it really wasn't all that many considering the mountain had also gone off to fight the Starks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only like a few, well, like a sort of standing guard there, and they walk out, and just like absolutely everyone they come across is dead.
Yeah.
And
And they're
like
not
they,
just dead; they're like all impaled on
yeah,
spears and pikes
yeah.
and stuff.
Mm. Um, and they end up running into him again one last time, and Jaqen offers to take Arya with him to Bravos to teach her to kill, essentially. And because of her family being scattered and she wants to get back to them, she kind of reluctantly, in a way, has to say no. So Jaqen gives her a coin and basically tells her that if she ever wants to find him again, to give the coin to a person from Bravos and say Vala Mogulis, which, as we find out in the next season, means all men must die. Um, and yeah, like I'm gonna say, like, this, aside from, like, if this is second to any other storyline, it would be second to the King's Landing one, purely because of the Tyrion stuff.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this would be either tied with that, or arguably sort of goes between, really. But I guess if I had to choose purely based on the storyline itself, I'd probably go with this one as my favorite.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably neck and neck with that and Tyrion's story.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, for all the reasons I said before, I love the interactions between Arya and Tywin. I love how she's been able to survive in her own way, and uh, lost my train of thought again.
uh, let's see. Oh, I guess that's another thing that I forgot to mention. There's the bit where we get how a story that Yoren gives, where uh, he held a grudge against this one guy to the point that he would say his name before he went to sleep, and Arya
Mm-hmm.
basically adopts that uh, as a way to both kind of help her sleep, and I guess to reassure, like, to keep, kind of basically to keep her on task, because like she knows that she's eventually going to kill all these people,
Yeah,
or at least thinks she's going to kill all of them. A few of them will probably, like, if you've watched the show, you'll know that at least some of them will probably or have, and some of them might later, most likely, considering who they are.
yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
basically just a list of people of all the people she wants dead, and it's
yeah.
become like a huge motif of her just lying down, going Joffrey, Cersei, the Hound, Ilyn Payne, Meryn Trent. And I
Mm.
actually, recently I just saw this video of Macy Williams on the red carpet or something, and she was recording this thing with her phone, and there's a bunch of fans behind her who were doing the death chant, and it was pretty amazing.
uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, like, Arya really did sort of come into her own properly in this season, and I would argue that she's definitely in my top 5 characters.
she's in my top three.
Um, Interesting. Like, I think the only reason she's possibly only top 5 and not top 3, if I can think, would pretty much just be because, like, 1 and 2 would sort of go between Tyrion and Tywin, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much free reign from there. Oh, I think, yeah, like, my top 3 are most likely like Varys, Tyrion, and Tywin for this season, at least. But Arya is definitely up there. Because Because the funny thing is all the Starks kind of go on very similar kind of story in the sense that like they all suffer loss and all have to go through something either fairly horrific or just generally something that's never really all that pleasant. As we said before, like the Starks go through a lot of shit. They never
Yeah.
really get to be like the ones that are still children. Essentially, never get to be children, as Maeve put it. And Arya seems to be the one that embraces it the most in a way, or at least grows up the quickest. Like her and like Bran kind of does as well, but Arya does it, I think, much quicker and honestly, yeah, I'd say she does it better as well. Which I guess the irony is, well, not irony, but like the thing is always pointed out that she seems to be better than him at a lot of stuff, anyways. I guess in
Yeah.
that sense, it would make sense
Yeah,
that.
she's a lot quick. She's a lot quicker to adapt to it than Bran is, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of it does have to do with Bran's kind of stationary the entire time. But since Arya has always been kind of adventurous and always getting herself in trouble, she's able to adapt to everything a lot quicker than Bran or Sansa or anybody else would. Well, except for Robb, but that should go
Yeah.
without saying.
Because yeah, I think it's only really, and I think it's also because like she's already gone through some stuff in the first season that helps shape her into this one. Because like as she says to Yoren, even though she didn't like physically like witness because he was holding us in a way that made it so she couldn't see it, she says she has a little dialogue with him where she says that she could basically see it anyway. She plays it out in her head of it happening, and she killed someone in the first season as well. So she's already seen some shit, and she's basically got a like. So I guess that's it. Like, I think the turning point for like Bran was generally finding out about the orphan boys and also having to witness Sir Roderick get beheaded. Is like you can't really. Well, I guess also the fact that like just generally being crippled, but with that it seems more like he goes into a sort of melancholy, sort of feeling sorry for himself kind of state for a while because of that, and then cheers up again when he finds out when Tyrion gets in that thing that makes it so he can still ride a horse.
Yeah.
But yeah, so his sort of maturities are sort of a bit slower, but at the same time, still fairly quick considering how young he's supposed to be. And well, we've pretty much covered that as far as characters and storylines go. So pretty much
And
just any final thoughts?
Oh, we haven't covered Daenerys' story.
Oh crap! Wow, that's sad.
Well, I think this one can be pretty short because I think this one can be pretty short because not a lot happens in it.
Yeah, maybe that's why I forgot it. Like the irony is when I was writing these all out, that might be the only one that I didn't actually do anything for at all.
Yeah.
Because I guess I figured it was easy enough to remember. But then I obviously forgot. It's her getting to Karth. She gets there. Her dragons get taken. She's trying to. Before that happens, she's trying to get around. Trying to basically demand things of people and not getting her way. And then her dragons get taken. She has that whole experience in the House of the Undying. And comes out essentially stronger for it in the end, and puts oh god, I cannot remember his name, but she puts that guy in his in the vault that turns out to be empty, and basically steals all his stuff so they can buy a boat.
Yeah, that's pretty much all that happens. But I think the only reason that happened is because Daenerys didn't really have that much to do in the books either. Like in Clash of Kings, there
Yeah.
are only 6 Daenerys chapters, and they're pretty
Mm.
they're spread out pretty thinly. So they
Yeah.
pretty much had to fill up time of her just going around going, "Where are my dragons? Where are my dragons? Where are my dragons?
Yeah.
I am the queen of these dragons. You will listen to me. Where are my fucking dragons?"
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but in the end, I did think it built up really well to that scene in the final episode where she's in the House of the Undying.
Mm.
Backtracking a bit, the whole dragons getting kidnapped didn't happen in the books.
Okay.
They basically just made that up so they can have more of a conflict in that story again
Right.
because
Right.
nothing really happens. Uh, but anyway, going back to the House of the Undying, I think that scene was put together really amazingly because
Oh
it
yeah.
might be foreshadowing because I think they said it's like th- things that like could be or I don't I don't remember if they
Mm.
really clarify it all that well,
Yeah.
but she does go into these different rooms and it shows her a lot of these really crazy things. Like she goes into the throne room at King's Landing and there's a whole bunch of snow. Then she
Mm.
goes into another room and she's at the wall. And the best scene in that entire thing was she enters this tent and Khal Drogo and her unborn child are there waiting for her. And
Yeah.
when I was watching this with my friends, one of my friends actually kind of teared up because she was like, "No, this can't be real." And Daenerys does actually kind of fall for it. Well,
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
falls for it, but she does realize it's all an illusion, and she's able
Mm.
to break it.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were able to beef some stuff up, like the character Zaros Daxos, the big black guy that
Yeah. That's him. That's what,
yeah,
that's what I was trying to think of.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's very different in the books. Like he doesn't have as big of a role in the books that he does in the show. In the show, he's basically the ambassador for Carthan, trying to and
Mm.
in the book, he's also constantly trying to get into her pants, but the thing is, like, he looks very different. He's not this big, tall black guy. He's like this skinny, whiny, pasty Asian guy who like throws a hissy fit every time Daenerys refuses to sleep with him. And yeah, and
uh,
uh, and
uh,
there was like some more tension about between her and Jorah. Like
yeah.
but yeah, like I said, not a lot happens in this.
Yeah. I think like I think what stopped Daenerys kind of being like, how dare you, like basically just bitching at everyone in Karth from
Hmm.
being annoying to me was just the reaction of everyone that she was bitching at, like uh the the trader. I forget
Hmm.
what the hell. I think they just like, yeah, he's like, oh, my name's too long to say or whatever. They just call him
Hmm.
uh the Spice King. That was it.
Yeah.
Um, uh, he basically just uses logic to diffuse every argument she makes. Like even when they show up at Karth, it's like, and she gets so pissed off that she threatens them at the gate, and it's like, well, clearly we're not going to let you in now because you're threatening to kill us.
Yeah.
And it's like, you've already told us that you're basically weak and your people are dying, so you know, if we just leave you out here, then you won't even be an issue.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, yeah, I think at that point in her story, she's basically like all bark and no bite. Like, yeah, she
yeah,
has dragons, but they're not fully grown. And yeah, She doesn't have an army. She doesn't have any of the things really that really mean anything to the people, not just in Carth, but pretty much anywhere. Like, yeah, she
yeah.
does have like the title and all that, but that's virtually it's virtually useless if you don't have the army to back it up.
Mm. And like, also this kind of explains the Karth stuff. Also gives us some insight as to why magic somehow works again. Like for one thing, that I like to think that it explains also why Melisandre's powers work. I could be wrong, but because it seems like it was a thing before season 1 as well, so it might just be that it's a case of her god actually existing, so this makes sense, so that she can actually get these powers. And but like generally, like you get the explanation from the warlock that basically it's because the dragons exist again that their powers exist again. So it makes sense that even if it wasn't brought up in the book, because I don't know, it would have made sense that they would try to keep her there if their power, as they claim, is stronger when they're close to the dragons instead of, you know, and of course that ends with him just being burned alive. So
Yeah.
doesn't end up well for him.
Nope.
And like it's interesting because one thing they don't set up that I'm kind of surprised they kind of hold off until a later season that really doesn't get mentioned at all until I think it is season 4, that they apparently did put figureheads in place in some places, and I'm wondering what the hell happened to Karth. Because they didn't really conquer Karth, they just kind of took Zarazone, Doxus' stuff and then just left. And so I'm like wondering, well, wait a minute, if all the leaders have been killed by the warlock, and now Zaro's essentially been got to spend the rest of his life in that safe, it's like in that vault. I mean, it's like, okay, so what happened to Karth then?
Yeah, I think they bring it back up in a Dance of Dragons. Like there is this one chapter where one of the characters comes back and like tells her that all this happened all because of you, and you're gonna have to pay for it. And when she refuses, they basically declare war on her. But that's way down the road, and that's just in the books, and I can't really remember all the itty bitty details about it. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah. Honestly, it's lucky you brought this up though, because otherwise I probably would have forgot. Which is weird because usually it's the storyline that stands out is usually the Daenerys one because it's the only one not set in Westeros, and generally it is kind of like, even though it has some dark moments in that, it's actually kind of comedic because she's just expecting to get. It's kind of like Jon Snow's story in the first season in a way, but like done differently, but the same kind of idea where they think they're entitled to things and they realize that they're going to have to earn them. But of course, whereas Jon Snow was whiny, she's demanding.
Yeah.
And then sort of realizes, okay, that ain't going to work. At least until I have some, like an army in that behind me, that's not going to work.
Yeah, but we'll deal with that when season 3 comes.
So overall thoughts. Generally, like, I really like this season. There are a few like low points that we've already brung up, and some stuff that probably could have been handled differently. But overall, I just generally do like this season, and I would argue that my favorite story is the Arya story.
Yeah, I thought this season was probably not as strong as season 1, but it definitely had its real high moments. But at the same time, there were some plot points that were kind of weak and didn't really go anywhere, or really were just there for exposition or whatever. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
If I had to pick like a least favorite storyline, I think in a way I'd probably go with Bran's whole thing, because it's, for the most part, seems like they stretched it out a bit too long. And they really could have just gone kind of episodes with that. Like, there is some nice setup, but otherwise most of it kind of feels a bit like filler. As Maeve brought
Yeah.
up, though, it's like there's the point of trying to properly establish the relationship with Maester Lewin, but even then, it's like not much really happens until Theon shows up. So
Yeah. Yeah, personally, I think the Daenerys' story was the weakest for pretty much the exact same reasons. Most of her scenes were pretty much filler, and I think there was like one episode where there's only one Daenerys scene, and there wasn't like any character development or anything. It's just her going around going, "Where are my dragons? Where are my dragons?" But yeah. All right, I
so
think we
yeah,
pretty much covered everything.
yep, that'll do it for the podcast without banners for season 2. We will be back next time to talk about season 3, which, wow, a lot happens in that one. So I'm pretty much,
Hold on to your butts.
yeah, I'm pretty much gonna have to rewatch that season, I think, just to properly summate it and get some thoughts on it or whatever. Well, so much just figuring out the plot lines again.
Yeah.
Because just kind of watching certain stuff it helped, but so we will be back with Maeve again. Hopefully, it'll be all three of us the whole way through, but if it happens, it happens.
Yep.
But we will be waiting until we can do it with her for the third and fourth, and we'll be trying to do both of those before season 5 starts. Otherwise, we'll most likely just get through them before we bother start to talk about season 5 as it is, because it's very close.
Yep. It's a coming.
I guess for the hell of it, since it's almost there, I'll just throw out a happy Easter to anyone that celebrates it. I'm not really doing anything for it, but if you are, um, if you celebrate it, good for you. If you don't, well, I hope you have a good Sunday at least.
All right.
And
All
so
right.
yeah, for the podcast without banners, I'm Thomas Fireheart, and with me, like last time, was Graham Christensen, and we will see you next time.
All right. Till next time.